Sheila Banks here with another video, and this one is entitled Emancipation Time, and it's based on a blog post that can be found at mysticbeastblog.blogspot.com. None but ourselves can free our own mind. Bob Marley, Redemption Song. Some claim President Trump is owned by the controllers of this world, and as a consequence, he will continue to do Israel's bidding. Others say he is playing 5D chess to eventually corner humanity's enemy. On the surface, it does not look like the latter is happening. However, I am in no position to make a final judgment about that. What I do know is that this president has been a disruptor like no other, and for that alone, I thank him. We now see more clearly the nature of the people running the world. They are psychopathic pedophiles. They are not human. They are parasitical predators that have infiltrated human societies. And they have been able to remain undercover because they control the narrative via mainstream media. Posing as our overlords, they have been running psychological operations meant to have us continually giving them our money and resources. Furthermore, these enslavers of humankind have had great success with recruiting dim-witted or sociopathic humans to do their bidding. These folks, when offered incentives, have no qualms about violating rights or ending your life. A case in point is the CIA agent who delivered the fatal bioweapon in a pair of shoes he gifted to Bob Marley. Years ago, I watched a video of that very CIA agent giving his deathbed confession. He said that he liked Bob, but was compelled to carry out the murderous deed for his country. He showed no malice, just an eerie lack of conscience. How can this be? The fact is, he is not a one-off. What we observed during the pandemic of 2020 tells us that. How many journalists, doctors, and pharmacists were willing to go along with the narrative because their associations told them to do so, or else? Their compliance made it possible for the controllers of this realm to sway the majority of the people. They helped to shepherd the masses into going along with authoritative dictates that made no sense and violated human rights. What about the many celebrities and politicians who actively promoted lethal injections about which they knew nothing? Some even encouraged the vaccinated to turn on those around them who refused to comply. And anyone sounding the alarm had to face contempt and humiliation. I'm not saying all these folks are sociopaths. However, something sociopathic went down during the COVID years, a phenomenon that reminds me of the famous Milgram experiment. From 1960 to 1963, Dr. Stanley Milgram carried out a number of experiments in which subjects were directed to give their fellow volunteers life-threatening shocks. These other volunteers were actually collaborating with the researcher and pretended to be receiving shocks. In reality, they were not harmed. However, the real shock is that more than 70% of the subjects followed the authorities' directive to deliberately harm an innocent stranger. Milgram's well-thought-out experiments exposed the human tendency to obey the dictates of an authority figure. His findings revealed that about 70% of the population are controlled by situational demands, whereas the other 30% remain steadfast to their own principles. Is this not what we observed during the COVID catastrophe? During the scamdemic, the majority went along with what the authorities demanded. Sadly, this human tendency to outsource thinking to the so-called experts had many clamoring to get their deadly boosters. And now, the rising numbers of injured and dead just might be the disaster that forces an evolutionary leap in our species. If ever there was a time for the masses to upgrade, it is now. Surely the majority is being called to ask the penetrating question, what was I thinking? We have to face facts. We are not yet the evolved and logical creatures that we fancy our species to be. Remember, it was a minority who stuck to their principles and refused to be injected with an experimental vaccine. For the body is a domestic animal. Therefore, you must go about perfecting yourself, says Jesus in the book of Thomas the Contender. Notice the words domestic animal were used to describe the state in which we find ourselves. According to the dictionary, such an animal has been tamed and kept by humans as a work animal, food source, or pet. Domestication of a species usually means the herd has become, through selective breeding, notably different from their wild ancestors. Interestingly enough, recent research on the human genome strongly suggests that a tinkering of our species' genes did occur about 200,000 years ago, and records deciphered from the ancient Sumerian tablets reinforce this finding. Mounting evidence supports the view that there has been a deliberate hijacking of the natural evolution of Homo sapiens. Could this help to explain our species' innate inclination to defer to authority? Is it possible that this domestication of Homo sapiens involving gene manipulation coupled with psychological programming was meant to keep our species loyal to a group of parasitical overlords? In any case, it has become apparent that this predatory class ruling over human affairs must be snuffed out once and for all. If our species is to survive and thrive, we must not ignore this pressure to change the way we operate in the world. The truth is that without the collective's cooperation, the COVID catastrophe could not have happened. This human tendency to defer to authority has proven to be a deadly one. So, the push is on for the masses to make an evolutionary leap. Our species is being called to a higher order of thinking. In the Milgram experiment, it was a mere 30% who rejected authoritative dictates because they were self-governed according to their principles. This implies that they did some kind of thinking about how they want to think. Is that not what is needed now as an antidote to our slave programming? Each one of us needs to develop the ability to self-govern according to principles. Being told what to think doesn't cut it anymore. We need to practice examining our own inner kingdom of thoughts and feelings. This advanced level of thought processing, called metacognition, enables understanding, analysis, and control of one's cognitive processes. And some even claim this to be a new type of intelligence arising in our species. It just might be true that Homo sapiens' evolutionary trajectory has been interfered with. However, we do not have to remain in bondage to a cabal of psychopaths. We can go about perfecting ourselves as Jesus beckons us to do. We are able to apply our incredible ability to manipulate to our own self-development. We can emancipate ourselves from mental slavery by living a principled life. In doing so, as a collective, we eventually impact the genetic makeup of our species and thus the nature of the beast.